The New Schoolfellow by George Eliot. It was a cold, wet January day on which Tom went back to the school. A day quite in keeping with his severe face of his destiny. If he had not carried in his pocket a parcel of sugar candy and a small Dutch doll for little Laura, there would have been no ray of expected pleasure to enliven the general gloom. But he liked to think how Laura would put out her lips and her tiny hands for the bits of sugar candy, and to give the greater keenness to this pleasure of imagination, he took out the parcel, made a small hole in the paper, and bit off a crystal or two, which had so lasting of an effect under the confined prospect and damp odors of the gig umbrella that he repeated the process more than once his way. "Well, deliver. We are glad to see you again," said Mr. Stelling heartily. "Take off your wrappings and come into the study till dinner. You'll find a bright fire there and a new companion." Tom felt in an uncomfortable flutter as he took off his woolen comforter and other wrappings. He had seen Philip Wackham at St. Ogg's. He did not see how a bad man's son could be very good. He was in a state of mingled embarrassment and defiance as he followed Mr. Stelling to the study. "Here is a new companion for you to shake hands with, Tulliver," said the gentleman on entering the study. "Master Philip Wackham, I shall leave you to make acquaintance by yourself. You already know something of each other, I imagine, for you to be neighbors at home." Tom looked confused and awkward, while Philip rose and glanced at him timidly. Tom did not like to go up and put out his hand, and he was not prepared to say "How do you do" on so short a notice. Mrs. Stelling wisely turned away and closed the door behind him. "Boys' shyness only wears off in the presence of their elders." Philip was at once too proud and too timid to walk towards Tom. He thought, or rather felt, that Tom had an aversion to looking at him. Everyone almost disliked looking at him, and this deformity was even more conspicuous when he walked, so they remained without shaking hands or even speaking, while Tom went to the fire and warmed himself every now and then, casting furtive glances at Philip, who seemed to be drawing absently, first one object and then another on the piece of paper he had before him. He had seated himself again, and as he drew, was thinking what he could say to Tom and trying to overcome his own repugnance to making the first advances. Tom began to look oftener and longer at Philip's face, for he could see it without noticing the hump, and it was not really a disagreeable face. Very old looking, Tom thought. He wondered how much older Philip was than himself. This Wackham was pale, puny fellow, and it was quite clear that he would not be able to play at anything worth speaking of. But he handled his pencil in an enviable manner and was apparently making one thing after another without any trouble. What was he drawing? Tom was quite warm now and wanted something new to be going forward. It was certainly more agreeable to have him as a companion than to stand out looking out of the study window at the rain and kicking his foot against the washboard in the solitude. Something would happen every day, a quarrel or something, and Tom thought he should rather like to show Philip that he had better not try his spiteful tricks on him. He suddenly walked across the hearth and looked at Philip's paper. "Why is the donkey with panniers and his spaniel and partridges in the corn?" he exclaimed, his tongue being completely loosened by surprise and admiration. "Oh, my buttons! I wished I could draw like that. I'm to learn drawing this half. I wonder if I shall learn to make dogs and donkeys." "Oh, you can do them without learning," said Philip. "I never learned drawing." "Never learned?" said Tom in amazement. "Why, when I make dogs and those horses and those things, the heads and legs won't come right. So I can see how they ought to be very well. I can make houses and all sorts of chimneys going all down the wall, and windows in the roof, and all that. But I dare say I could do dogs and horses if I was to try more," he added, reflecting that Philip might falsely suppose that he was going to knock under if he were too frank about the imperfection about his accomplishments. Oh yes, said Philip. It's very easy. You have only you have only to look well at things and draw them over and over again. What you do wrong once, you can alter the next time. But haven't you been taught anything? Said Tom, beginning to have a puzzled suspicion that Philip's crooked back might be the source of remarkable faculties. I thought you have been to school a long while. Yes, said Philip, smiling. I have been taught Latin and Greek and mathematics and writing and such things. Oh, but I say, you don't like Latin though, do you? Said Tom, lowering his voice confidently. Pretty well. I don't care much about it, said Philip. Ah, but perhaps you haven't got into the Properiaque Maribus, said Tom, nodding his head sideways as much as to say, that was the test. It was easy talking till you came to that. Philip felt some bitter complacency in the promising stupidity of his well-made, active-looking boy, but made polite by his own extreme sensitiveness as well as by his desire to conciliate. He checked his inclination to laugh and said quietly, I've done with the grammar. I don't need to learn that anymore. Then you won't have the same lessons as I shall, said Tom with a sense of disappointment. No, but I dare say I can help you. I shall be very glad to help you if I can. Tom did not say thank you, for he was quite absorbed in the thought that Wackham's son did not seem so spiteful a fellow as might have been expected. I say, he said presently, do you love your father? Yes, said Philip, coloring deeply. Don't you love yours? Oh, yes, I only wanted to know, said Tom, rather ashamed of himself. Now he saw Philip coloring and looking uncomfortable. He found much difficulty in adjusting his attitude of mind towards the son of lawyer Wackham, and it had occurred to him that if Philip disliked his father, that might go some way towards clearing of his perplexity. Shall you learn drawing now? He said, by the way, changing the subject. No, said Philip. My father wishes me to give all my time to other things now. What? Latin, Euclid, and those things? Said Tom. Yes, said Philip, who had left off using his pencil and was resting his head on one hand while Tom was leaning forward on both elbows and looking with increasing admiration at the dog and the donkey. And you don't mind that? Said Tom with strong curiosity. No, I like to know what everybody else knows. I can study what I like by and by. I can't think why anybody should learn Latin, said Tom. It's no good. It's part of the education of a gentleman, said Philip. All gentlemen learn the same things. What? Do you think Sir John Craig, the master of Harriers, knows Latin? Said Tom, who had often thought he should like to resemble Sir John Craig. He learnt it when he was a boy, of course, said Philip, but I dare say he has forgotten it. Oh, well, I can do that then, said Tom, not with an epigrammatic intention but with serious satisfaction at the idea that as far as Latin was concerned, there was no hindrance to his resembling Sir John Craig. Only you are obliged to remember it when you are at school, as you have got to learn so many lines of the speaker. Mr. Stelling's very particular, do you know? He'll have you up 10 times if you say nam for jam. He won't let you go a little wrong, I can tell you. Oh, I don't mind, said Philip, unable to choke a laugh. I can remember things easily, and there are some lessons I'm very fond of. I'm very fond of Greek history and everything about Greeks. I should like to have been a Greek and fought the Persians, and then have come home and have written tragedies, or have been listened to by everybody for my wisdom like Socrates, and have died a grand death. Why were the Greek greats fighters? Said Tom, who saw a vista in his direction. Is there anything like David and Goliath and Samson in Greek history? Those are the only bits I like in the history of the Jews. Oh, there are very fine stories of that sort about the Greeks, about the heroes of the early times who had killed the wild beast as Samson did. And in the Odyssey there's a beautiful poem. There's a more wonderful giant than Goliath, Polypheme, who had only one eye in the middle of his forehead, and Ulysses, his little fellow but very wise and cunning, got a red-hot pine tree and stuck it into his one eye and made him roar like 1,000 bulls. Oh, what fun, said Tom, jumping away from the table and stamping first with one leg and then the other. I say, can you tell me all about those stories? Because I shall learn Greek, shall I? He added, pausing in his stamping with a sudden alarm lest the contrary might be possible. Does everybody learn Greek? Will Mr. Stelling make me begin with it, do you think? No, I should think not. Very likely not, said Philip. But you may read those stories without knowing Greek. I've got him in English. Oh, but I don't like reading. I'd sooner have you tell them to me. But only the fighting ones. My sister Maggie is always wanting to tell me stories, but they are stupid. Can you tell a good many fighting stories? Oh, yes, said Philip. Lots of them. Besides the Greek stories, I can tell you about Richard Coeur de Lion and Saladin, and about William Wallace and Robert Bruce and James Douglas. I know no end. You're older than I am, aren't you? Said Tom. Why? How old are you? I am 15. I'm only going in 14, said Tom. I wish Mr. Stelling would let us go fishing. I could show you how to fish. You should be able to fish, wouldn't you? It's only standing and sitting still. Tom, in his turn, wished to make the balance tip in his favor. This hunchback must not suppose that his acquaintance with fighting stories put him on par with actual fighting hero like Tom Tulliver. Philip winced under this allusion to his unfitness for active sports, and he answered almost peevishly, I can't bear fishing. I think people look like fools sitting and watching a line hour after hour, or else throwing and catching nothing. Ah, but you wouldn't say they looked like fools when they landed a big pike. I can tell you, said Tom, who had never caught anything big that was in his life, but whose imagination was on the stretch with indignant zeal for the honor of the sport. Mackin's son, it was plain, had his disagreeable points and must be kept in due check. Happily for the harmony of the first interview, they were now called to dinner, and Philip was not allowed to develop further his unsound views on the subject of fishing. Thank you.